Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Prayer by Srila Bhaktivedanta to an unnamed Vaishnava, generic song. The Vaishnava is described as an ocean of mercy, and Bhaktivedanta prays, be merciful to this servant. Edase Kora, give me the shade of your lotus feet. Dear Pada Chaya, purify me. Roshechi Shongara, I'm here sitting, waiting for your association. Control, subdue my six urges, Choi Vegadami, purify my six faults, give me the six qualities, give me the six kinds of saintly association. First verse, Tomara Charana. I hold on to your lotus feet, and here I'm sitting here waiting for your association. Alone I don't have strength for Harinam Sankirtan. I find I don't have strength, nahi paibo. So please be merciful and give me a drop of faith, and thus give me the treasure or the wealth of Krishna now. Krishna is yours. You can give Krishna. You have that power. I'm running behind you, calling out, Krishna, Krishna. This is Bhaktivedanta Thakur's prayer. Yeah, I'll leave some time at the end for questions. So you may want to write them down. Otherwise, we give them verbally. Usually, if they're written, they're hopefully they're more clearly formulated. Writing, as Srila Prabhupada said, writing. It says it forces you to think of Krishna. So, we'll begin. Almost ready. Switch it on. Might not yet. Okay. Alright, yesterday I was speaking about the one of the several things I was speaking about was I have to press it at the bottom. Oh, it's a case of more. Yeah. One of the several things I was speaking about was how previously, especially in Indian culture, the upbringing, especially for the higher castes, especially for Brahmanas, would be such that, just switch it on. Would be that they didn't really think about it. The thought of sex, it wasn't there, certainly not in the way that it is in the modern age, where we're pump-fed with sexual instigation. What's the word? Motivation. Provocation. Practically from the very beginning of life. But it's interesting that I mean, it wasn't that, even in previous ages, that even in a much better culture, it wasn't that the sex urge wasn't there. The narration of Rishi Shringa was illustrative of this, that his father, Rishi Shringa, whose father's name I don't remember just now, wanted to completely protect Rishi Shringa from sexual urges by keeping him free from any association with the opposite sex from his very childhood. Inevitably, as fate would have it, he did come in contact with the opposite sex and was immediately attracted. And there are many narrations in Shastra of great persons who would be expected to be above the sexual urge or in control of the sexual urge, who fell down rather grossly into sexual activities. Even Lord Brahma chased after his daughter. That example is given by Kapila Dev of the all-pervasiveness of the sexual urge, how it defines the material world practically. One is in material consciousness if he has the sexual urge, and everyone, Lord Kapila Dev says, except Nara and Rishi, they're victims, willing victims of this sexual urge. So there are many narrations in Shastra. Of course, we should, by reading Shastra, we might get the idea that the rishis and demigods, they're all just totally servile to the sexual urge. But rather it should be understood that even though these incidents are recorded because they are exceptions to the norm, it's not that every rishi is all the time falling down. It's just like if you read in the newspaper, well, in India, if you read in the newspaper about every day they're saying about Kashmir and some bombings and killings, and you might think that's all that ever goes on there. I've never been there. Well, it's just like a generation ago in Belfast. All the news is bombings and killings and shootings. But if you go there, it's not happening all the time. I mean, you hear a bomb going off now and then, and see buildings gutted out and all this kind of thing. But it wasn't like it was. Life went on. It wasn't just like at every minute, in every street in Belfast there was a killing. And there were some, but it was part of life, but it wasn't all of life. So like that, in that rishis, they were susceptible and sometimes succumbed to the sexual urge. Doesn't mean that was the norm, that it was going on at every moment. Otherwise, what's the meaning to them being rishis at all? So, in the modern age, yes, it's a different age. It's a very different age. And the susceptibility to the sexual urge is more because we're not trained as real brahmacharis. What we say brahmacharis means that most of us have come to being attracted to the ideal of brahmachari life, having experienced normal, or what might be called normal in this madhouse of the modern material world, normal life, which is full of sexual provocation. So it's more difficult for us, as Srila Prabhupada notes in the narration of Ajamil, that Ajamil was a pure Brahmana by upbringing, and he didn't have any bad thoughts in his mind, but they were there in subtle form. Samskar, there's an impression on the mind that maybe from previous lives, and he lost his sense when he saw a Shudra embracing a prostitute, and he became fallen. So Srila Prabhupada notes in that section that if even someone of pure upbringing like a Jamil can fall down, then what to speak of in the modern age where such an act which is considered shameful, that a man and a woman are embracing in a public place, that has become normal. It's considered a normal thing. Actually, sexual acts, that should be a private thing between husband and wife. I mean, in traditional Indian culture, even a man and wife, they'll hardly talk together in public even. What to speak of holding hands or kissing each other, or even to talk with each other. It's not much in public, or even more in a public meeting. The women won't be there at all. They'd be in a separate area altogether. Until recently, in India, in religious meetings, men and women, they'd be divided by a bamboo screen. They wouldn't see each other. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, he gave initiation to women disciples from behind a screen. He didn't see them. The Ayurvedic doctors, they would take the pulse of women patients using a very fine thread from behind a screen. They wouldn't see them. That culture was there. So there's a reason for that. That in the modern age, that would be considered just ridiculously conservative and inhuman. But there's a reason for that, because in Vedic culture it's understood, and not only Vedic culture but all over the world it's understood that the sexual urge is very powerful and has to be kept in control, otherwise it's a social disaster. And that it is a social disaster is, the evidence is there it's called modern society and everything that goes with it. That is the evidence. And foolishly, in our society, I'm talking about ISKCON today, we are also not afraid enough of Maya. And actually Srila Prabhupada said that. He said that my disciples, they're not afraid. They're not afraid of Maya. That's a fault. So it's good to be afraid. We're told fear is a negative emotion, but to be afraid of the right thing is intelligent. So to have a fear of Maya is intelligent. It might be a difficult thing because as a sannyasi, I'm in a difficult situation sometimes, because a sannyasi is a social role as much as it's a social role. It's part of our ashram. So grihastas, especially in India, they expect blessings and all this kind of thing. Go to their house and pat their babies on their head and all this kind of thing. So that's a role of a sannyasi, to encourage grihastas. But traditionally, men and women don't look at each other, especially sannyasis don't look at women. But so you're kind of you're stuck in a difficult situation, because some women, they expect you to look at them and give them a little encouragement by giving them an encouraging look, and then others don't want you to look at them because, and when you're caught, So it's two cultures going on side by side, the traditional culture and then the modern culture. So some might blame you for looking, and some might blame you for not looking. What to do? You decide. Actually, the Brahmacari ashram is, in many ways, is the best ashram for spiritual advancement. The sannyasa, in some ways, not the best. For preaching, it has its advantages, and we need sannyasis. We need more sannyasis in our movement. Not by rubber stamping. Not that we're going to come and hit you all on the head with a danda and make you into sannyasi, as is done in some institutions. Take immature, or less qualified people and give them sannyas. It is a required institution, but for preaching it gives some facility, especially within our ISKCON. It's respected. Of course, if you're out on the street distributing books, people don't give a damn whether you're a senior monk or a new monk or who the hell you are. They don't give a damn about you anyway. But within our society, ISKCON, sannyas, in some areas more than others, carries some prestige. And the sannyas ashram in ISKCON was at a pretty low ebb around the mid-1980s, with many fall downs, but now it's become more strict about awarding sannyas, and sannyas ashram has gained some status. So within our society, sannyas is respected. Among Indians, it's respected, that culture is there. So for preaching, it's a facility, which is why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, and why Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur reintroduced sannyas into the Gauriya Sampradaya. So it's a facility for preaching, and we're meant for preaching. We need these lights on. Did anyone need them? We turn them off, right? It's polluting, and it costs money, and what's the point? Why waste Krishna's money? On the other hand, it can be overwhelming. There's so many people calling you here and there. Please come to our house, please come to our country, please come to our meeting, please come to our opening, please come to this, come to that, give us 5 minutes, give us 2 minutes, which is never 2 minutes, and like that. And you're always in the spotlight, which can be good, in as much as you have to be careful of what you're doing, knowing that people are watching all the time. But at the same time, for maintaining humility, Brahmacaris, which is the cornerstone of advancement in Krishna consciousness, Brahmacari is better because you're just a nobody. Who cares? So in one sense that's good, unless we're hankering after name, fame and glory, which isn't good anyway. And it gives one the opportunity to perform humble service. It's difficult for sannyasis because devotees don't let you. It's difficult even to carry my bag from one part of the room to another often. Because brahmacharis are supposed to serve sannyasis. Everyone's supposed to serve sannyasis, which is why, and one of the reasons Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur reintroduced the sannyas institution, to give junior devotees the opportunity to serve seniors, to institute that formally. Because it's difficult to perform humble service if you're in many. Because it doesn't mean that you can't be humble. You can be humble, but at the same, it's not in and of itself a humble situation. It's you're always sitting on a big seat above everyone else and telling them. It's a guru position. As Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur said, that if a Vaishnava becomes a guru, he ceases to be a Vaishnava. On the other hand, if he doesn't become a guru, then the parampara will be stopped. So what to do? His first duty is to follow the duty of his guru, who tells him to be a guru. So he's humble enough to follow the order of his guru. To hell with all you people criticizing, I'll follow my guru. That's more or less the summary of an amazing section of his speech, well known. But it's for personal spiritual advancement, Brahmacari ashram is very conducive. The opportunity to serve one's guru in a humble way, without the entanglement of putra dara grihadeshu, sons, wife, home, and all the other paraphernalia. There's a look of I know all about it. That means been through it, seen it, done it, and from those who have been married, it's entanglement, is it not? this big entanglement. So it's the best ashram. You're in a very good ashram, and I encourage all of you who are somewhat older and mature to take sannyas. I'm very much for that, but at the same time you should know that before you take sannyas, take full advantage of your Brahmacari situation to make lots of spiritual advancements so that you're fit for taking sannyas. So, getting back to various anomalies and anarthas in ISKCON today. One of them, as I perceive it, to give that qualifier, is a lot of talk about relationships. And of course, Vaishnava relationships are important. Rupa Goswami speaks of Priti Lakshana, the exchanges between Vaishnavas which are characteristic of love between them. And historically speaking, within our movement, there was a time when it was pretty rough. Nowadays we're more sophisticated in our roughness. We do it more like the British way, smile nicely while you stab others in the back. We're not so straightforward as we used to be. So it was there was a pretty rough period especially in the age of the super gurus and competing to outdo each other, and so as a result of this, there was a lot of emphasis on how we should be nice to each other, which is true. Definitely, Vaishnavas should be nice to each other, but in my perspective of this not very humble soul sitting here, sometimes it's taken too far. We get too much into talking about relationships and being nice with each other, whereas in Shastra we find that we find very close relationships, for instance, between the Pandavas, who we don't find them sitting around talking about relationships all the time. They just get on with what they're doing, and they have a service to do. They're all serving Yudhishthira, and they're all together serving Krishna. So if we're focused on the mission, serving Srila Prabhupada's mission, the mission of all the Acharyas and of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we're actually striving with all our energy and last drop of blood to conjointly serve the mission, then we'll probably fight with each other sometimes and dance together in kirtan a lot, and we'll do a lot of preaching together, and like I said, we'll probably disagree and fight with each other sometimes too, and we'll have very tight relationships based on service. Just like in the army, people have tight, those who are fighting together, they have tight relationships because they're literally living in a situation of life and death together, and literally they have to help each other survive and defeat the enemy. It's an extremely intense situation. So when we're doing what we should be doing, which is intensely giving ourselves to the Sankirtan mission, and we're all doing that, then just that intense situation in which where it's life and death, spiritual life and death, we're exerting ourselves, and it's risk. Preaching is a risk, and we're striving for spiritual advancement, and it may be, there will be some tension sometimes. In any actually very close relationship, there will be tension. It's not always smooth. In superficial relationships, it always seems very smooth, and it's always important to keep things looking smooth, although there's the envy is not shown, it's underneath. Whereas in real heart-to-heart relationships, there can be tension. We see that Arjuna very humbly surrenders to Krishna, and Arjuna is feeling devastated, and Krishna doesn't come up to him and say, oh, never mind, here's some tissues, and Krishna calls it, you're a damn fool, what the hell are you talking about? You know, you're supposed to be a fighter and you're talking all this rubbish, talking like a damn fool. That's Krishna's, how he immediately responds to Arjuna. And Arjuna could say, well, hell with you, forget it, get off my chariot. But Arjuna, he doesn't respond like that. Krishna knows that he can talk to Arjuna like this. It's a very straightforward relationship. So, that's how Kshatriyas behave. And someone might get insulted and fight, but there was no question, because Arjuna and Krishna were such close friends, sometimes lying on the bed together, joking with each other. Arjuna sometimes insulting Krishna, as a joking way, as close friends may do. So, the real relationships, you don't get them by talking about them. You get them by acting together, doing things together, serving together. And that's what Brahmachari life is all about. It's meant service. Brahmachari is the servant of the Guru. Of course, as Vaishnavas, we're servants of all the Vaishnavas, but especially the Brahmachari relationship is defined, the Brahmachari situation is defined traditionally in relationship to the Guru. That's his specific situation, the Brahmachari and the Gurukul. Brahmachari Gurukule Vasandanta Guru Hitam Acharandasa Vannicho Guru Sudhira Sohridam. Very close relationship with his Guru, which means the Guru, as Prabhupada explained, his duty is to chastise the disciple even if there's nothing wrong with him. So anyway, chastise him. Even if he doesn't do anything wrong, he should still chastise him. Now that sounds pretty unreasonable, doesn't it? That's parents send their children to a guru for that. And the disciple, he accepts that. It's not this superficial, give your children lots of computer games and no, it's no toys, no games, no computer games in the forest. It's very intense. Just a few boys together with their guru, who's Vaishnavas are intense. Spiritually advanced persons are intense. So it's a very intense and intensive upbringing, but the relationships also become very tight, as we see Krishna with Sudama. They lived together as brahmacharis. They went through so much difficulty together, and then they could never forget each other, even after many, many years, and they never forgot their love for their guru either. So, brahmacharis are meant for selfless service. And that is the very means by which all anarthas will be overcome, and one will attain perfection, and that is perfection. The attitude of selfless service, that in itself is perfection. So that especially is meant for brahmachari life. Which again, it's if one does go to the Grihastha ashram, it becomes much more difficult to have the attitude of selfless service to Guru and Krishna. There's the possibility of dovetailing everything in Krishna's service in the household life, but in brahmachari life, there's no need to think of dovetailing anything, because you're directly engaged in the service of Guru and Krishna. So that's the meaning of brahmachari life. Atma Nivedan, giving oneself. Atma Samadhi means the same thing. It's a very happy life. Bhaktivedanta Thakur was in the Grihastha ashram, and far above us all, and the dust of his lotus feet we aspire for. As brahmacharis, we want to serve Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So he says, Atmanivedan tua pade kori, hoino paramashuke, dukkha dure gelo, chinta narahilo. What's the last line? Chodike anandade. That's the last line of that verse. He says that he's praying to Krishna, that I have surrendered myself at your lotus feet, and I've become supremely blissful by doing so. All my distress has gone far away. I have no more anxiety, and everywhere I see happiness. That's Krishna consciousness, isn't it? Atmaniveda, that's the self-surrender, which is possible if one has complete faith. You can't surrender yourself unless you have complete faith. So again, that's the Brahmacari disciple and in relationship with the Guru. The actual relationship, of course, nowadays it's different. The Gurus, they kind of bargain with their disciple, you know. Well, I don't want to do that. Okay, we want to do something else. It's like, no, well, it can be painful being a guru, dealing with all this bargaining backwards and forwards. But actual bliss comes from surrender, and then surrender comes from faith. One can surrender if one has faith. There are no half brahmacharis, half baked. There may be some in the brahmachari ashram who are like that, half baked. They don't want to get married because there's too much trouble, but they don't want to be a real brahmachari because that's too much trouble too. So they found some comfortable hole in the corner where they can come out from time to time, like the cockroach comes out, and wipe the floor, and they know well enough how to keep out of trouble and get their 3 meals a day or whatever. So that's not a brahmachari. And that kind of brahmachari is not going to change the world, and not going to be attractive to others. Not going to make any spiritual advance. Not really a brahmachari anyway, because brahmachari, Brahma means spirit, and chari means one who moves. So one who's absorbed in the spiritual atmosphere. Brahmachari, in many ways, it's the synonym of brahmana. So brahmachari is meant for spiritual life, just in case anyone had any other idea. So, if anyone's thinking of what I like, if this is the main symptom of a conditioned soul. Well, in one purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the main condition of a conditioned soul is that he talks all nonsense. So, but the symptom of a conditioned soul is instead of thinking of what is that? Tumitu ama amitu toma. Again, Bhaktivedanta Thakur says about Krishna, I am yours and you are mine. So instead of that, a non-devotee or a materialist thinks in terms of ahammameti, I and mine. So a brahmachari is not meant for thinking like this. He's meant for, again, selfless service. Not what, a non-devotee is always thinking, what do I want? And then his mind operates on the platform of sankalpa vikalpa. Everything he sees, he thinks, can I use it for my sense gratification? Is it favorable for my sense gratification? If yes, he desires it. If no, he rejects it. So a brahmachari is not meant for that. A brahmachari is, of course, all devotees, but a brahmachari has got the opportunity to be a full devotee. He doesn't have anything else to do but to serve Guru and Krishna. So his whole life is anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. Everything favorable for Krishna's service he accepts, and everything unfavorable he rejects. And he's in the situation where he doesn't have, everything's favorable. The situation is set up that everything is favorable for his service to Krishna. There are no major obstacles. He doesn't have anything else to do. So to be on the platform of I want this, I want that, it's a farce. It's antithetical to the whole Brahmacari consciousness. So one should be fully into it. You're going to be a Brahmacari. Be a Brahmacari. Not a half-baked misfit. Of course, that doesn't mean that the Brahmacari should be rajasic also. So they've got steam coming out of their ears. Brahmacari means Brahmana. Of course, there can be traditionally boys from Kshatriya and Vaishya backgrounds, but in our movement especially, Srila Prabhupada only create Brahmanas, so Sattvic should be Sattvic. Sattvic also doesn't mean living very peacefully, not too peacefully, not very comfortably. Aram is haram. Comfort is abominable. Comfort is not comfortable life. Brahmacari life is not meant for comfortable life. Srila Prabhupada sometimes quoted Tapasa brahmacharyena. This comes in a list of activities which are not in themselves capable of giving the highest perfection of life, but Srila Prabhupada often quoted this, that tapasya and brahmacharya, they are linked together. Brahmacharya is expected that there will be tapasya. Tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam shudyat yasmat brahma sokyam tvanantam. Here we find the words tapas and brahma. They come together in a different context. But the point is that to attain spiritual happiness, one has to undergo tapasya, which means foregoing material happiness. So Brahmacari life is meant for that. It's not meant for comfortable living. Now, in some situations, Brahmacharis act as I'm talking about situations within our ISKCON movement. In places where the movement is more established, Brahmacharis often act in a role similar to traditional Brahmanas, in as much as they become spiritual advisors to devotees, maybe householder devotees or junior brahmacharis, and some facility may be offered to them. But one should be very careful of becoming, nevertheless, one should be careful of becoming too comfortable. If one has a role in which people offer him respect and some facilities, one has to be very careful of becoming both physically and psychologically, I guess is the term, comfortable. As Srila Prabhupada wrote in one famous letter, that leaders, they should always give devotees a challenge. Now on the one hand, we definitely need senior, mature devotees to advise what we call congregational members and junior brahmacharis. But on the other hand, it can be a trap also to become too comfortable. So the pioneering spirit, even though we do have a developed congregation, and in some countries, especially the Manor is maybe the prime example throughout the world of how our movement has become accepted within a certain niche in established society. So yeah, it's required that there are devotees who are mature, steady, and competent to give advice on others how to conduct their lives in Krishna consciousness. But at the same time, even in this situation, it's still very much a pioneering movement, and still our movement is minuscule compared to, in terms of population and influence. We have a lot of work to do, and in many countries around the world, or even in Britain, in many places, our movement is not present practically, apart from occasional visits, or we have a small preaching center. And in many ways that pioneering spirit that's very suitable for brahmacharis. We're talking about how brahmacharis are meant for full-hearted service. So to go out among non-devotees and try to spread Krishna consciousness among people who are not interested, not respectful, it's a great challenge which demands all our energy, all our concentration. Yeah, that's the danger with being in an established situation. The danger is that we get in a rut. I hope you all understand what that means, those who are not native English or speak of it. How have we said it? You kind of get in a routine, and there's no real challenge to by which one has to one is challenged to surrender to Krishna. When one is out on book distribution, and actually more so in the earlier days of the movement, it was a great challenge, because many times the police would be after us, not to take books from us, but to stop us distributing the books, arresting us. Actually, one of my first services in the movement as a newer member and not a very experienced book distributor was to stand in for other book distributors who had been arrested, and to go to court and pretend I was someone else and pay the formality, plead guilty and pay the £5 fine to save other book distributors the trouble of wasting their time. I'd waste my time instead. So, be there with all the prostitutes who are also arrested, and they're paying their £5 fine. And one day, is your name such and such? Yes. And the next day, is your name such and such? Same magistrate? Yes. Didn't even look, it was just a completely boring job for the magistrate. Same prostitutes probably every day also. So yeah, it was a nuisance. Sometimes even before you took out your books, they'd arrest you. You didn't even sell anything. So it was a great challenge. Still, it's a challenge. Maya is always challenging, but especially if we're head on against Maya, face to face, preaching Krishna consciousness. That helps to keep us sharp. Otherwise, there's a danger in becoming comfortable. So, book distribution, going out organizing public programs and festivals, Harinam, all these activities. For those devotees who are not full-time engaged in these activities, it is required also that some brahmacharis act as what we might say formal brahmana advisors, but it's also important for them to get out of the comfort zone and get into the uncomfortable, what might seem to be uncomfortable, going out among the non-devotees. As Srila Prabhupada writes in one purport, that I can't remember exactly, probably Prahladananda Maharaj can give us the exact words, that if one is not constantly preaching to the non-devotees, it's very difficult to get out of the clutches of the three modes of material nature. In the 7th canto, one of the purports. Which, if we rephrase that, we could take that if we are constantly preaching to non-devotees, then it is very easy to get out of the three modes of nature, and probably one is already out of the modes of nature. One's acting on the spiritual platform. So, talking about being Brahmana advisors, Brahmacharis have to be very careful in advising grihastas, and specifically they should be very careful. I advise, although some may advise otherwise, but don't get very much involved in grihastas' intimate problems, and they have lots of them. I mean, that's what I often say. If Brahmacharis have lots of problems, they're feeling lots of problems and disturbance in their mind, they're in the wrong ashram. They should go to the ashram of problems, the grihasta ashram. If you're not feeling content as a brahmachari, if you're feeling so much disturbed, then better you go to that ashram. It's more suitable for you. Grihasta life is full of difficulties. It's a very difficult, especially in the modern age where the whole society is set up on wrong principles. The nuclear family is a total disaster. It's really it's a very difficult ashram, and grihastas, they often want advice how to practice Krishna consciousness amidst all these difficulties. But brahmacharis and sannyasis, they have to be careful not to get too much intimately involved, because if one becomes too much involved, then it will drag one's own consciousness down, and then one isn't able to properly advise others or even be Krishna conscious oneself. And one may become entangled. And both sides are liable to blame you. There's no end to these problems. Actually, the solution to grihasta problems is to come to the spiritual platform. That's the ultimate solution. As with any material situation, there's no end. You can try and sort it, adjust it this way, talk that way, but it's just the very nature of material life is that it is entangling, and it's full of envy and bad feeling, and a lot of the grihasta problems are just they're just caused by lack of Krishna consciousness. So the encouragement should be to come to the spiritual platform, but don't get too much intimately involved. It's not at all suitable for a brahmachari. You'll certainly be rightly blamed by others if one becomes too much intimately involved in all the details of, well, he said that and she said that, and then he beat me and then I beat him, and it's not meant for brahmacharis. Be careful. Outside the comfort zone, there's a lot of mercy. So the tendency of the conditioned soul is to always seek comfort. Situation where everything's nice, my body feels nice, my mind feels nice. But the mercy is in the situation where everything's not nice. That doesn't mean that we have to deliberately flagellate ourselves. That means whipping yourself, as some religious people do. It's been going on throughout history, and it's still quite popular in Iran today. So we don't have to unnecessarily take lots of austerities, and unnecessary austerities, but the austerity of preaching and doing the needful, as Srila Prabhupada often said, for spreading Krishna consciousness also. That in itself is an austerity, and we shouldn't try to avoid that. Rather, by taking it up, we get the mercy of Guru and Gauranga. So the mercy is outside the comfort zone. Many years ago, I remember one Sankirtan Brahmachari, his name was Sannyasi, he's been Sannyasi for many years. He narrated this incident in Germany. They were supposed to go out on Sankirtan, but that day it was snowing rather severely. So they thought, well, there's not going to be many people out today, so why don't we just take a day off and have hearing and chanting? So they were inside some apartment or something like that. Then outside the apartment they heard They looked outside. Through the snow they saw people, workmen, drilling the road. And he thought, well, if they can be out in the snow for sense gratification, they're working for sense gratification, we should be out there too, serving Krishna. And they went up. Yeah, an example of unnecessary austerity, he's talking about snow, is that we used to hear of in the snow of Russia, which is legendary in the sense that it's famous. Brahmachari taking bath outside at 3:30 in the morning in the winter in Russia. This is an example of unnecessary austerity, which is not conducive to Krishna consciousness in the sense that you're likely to get sick, if not immediately, in the long term. And, many of our sannyasis today, their health problems are caused by such misplaced enthusiasm in our youth. Taking a shower in sub-zero temperatures outside with the wind blowing. Of course, in Finland they do that with the sauna, right? But that's healthy, hot and cold. All right, do the needful. I just said that. So that brings up the question of institutional versus individual needs. For the for running on the temple, there may be so many things that there's always something to do, and it may be there's no one else to carry out the garbage, so do it. Someone should do it. So their institution, it may be required. There's no money. When as I said, I joined here. I was allowed to join here. There was actually almost no book distribution going on. There was record distribution going on because the temple was deeply in debt due to some mismanagement. So the devotees weren't very happy, and in fact at the first Sankirtan meeting I went to, the GBC told us that there's no use to try and distribute books in Britain because people are too demoniac to take them. Because they wanted everyone out distributing. The devotees were fed up of distributing records, but they wanted records distributed to clear the debt. So it was an institutional need, but the individual. But we hadn't. I was the first new brahmachari in over a year, and that was in the 1970s, right? Because we weren't distributing books, we were distributing records, and Krishna wasn't sending. I believe it or not, I came from a book. From reading one of Prabhupada's books. I came to check it out, what's going on here. So the need of the institution at that time, it was perceived as that we need to distribute records, but individually the devotees were feeling dried up. They were doing it as a matter of duty. So these two needs, they often conflict with each other. Individual needs for our own spiritual nourishment and welfare, and even physical nourishment and welfare, and the needs of the institution. So as I was saying yesterday, we should be careful to place ourselves in a situation where our leaders, they are cognizant of and concerned with the spiritual welfare of the brahmacharis in their care, that they don't just use them as and in fact after that I was speaking privately with Janananda Maharaj, and he told me of one temple president who makes lots of brahmacharis, and he gives them, says 5 years and they'll be out, and he just has them out collecting, and he said with 5 years that's the maximum. He knows they'll all go off to Maya and he doesn't care. As I was of course, I heard it about this particular temple president many times. He's successful in many ways. He collects money, runs his temple on. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So, but the men don't stay, and he doesn't seem to care about that very much. He's just interested in running on his institution. So it is important again there'll never be what we might call a perfect balance. We have to serve the needs of the institution, and in doing so our own individual needs will be served, but at the same time we have a need to hear and chant about Krishna and to develop spiritually, and that won't come simply by being a workhorse. Again, I was recently in a country where they have a farm, and I was talking to devotees, and they said, well, we don't have much classes, or even if they're there, hardly anyone goes, and devotees chant their rounds whenever they can because there's so much work to do. And I said, well, how long has this been going on for? And they said, for 18 years. So I said, well, what's the point of the farm? The farm is so that we can be Krishna conscious. Otherwise, it could be called karma yoga, that we work hard and we offer the results to Krishna. But Prabhupada's idea was different. That we live on the farm in a manner that we save time for hearing and chanting about Krishna. So it's the same syndrome that people come to the farm with the idea we're in a farm for Krishna and live simply, but mostly they don't stay and they leave, and then it's a few who are working hard, and they go on and on and on like this. So leaders have to, again, we have to see that our personal progress is seen to, and at the same time serve the needs of the institution. We've been talking a lot about how Brahmachari's life, it means full surrender, fully into it, strict, well I didn't mention it, but of course Brahmachari life means strict following. At the same time, we have to remember that Bhakti means love. It's not sentimental, pie-in-the-sky love, but strictness and austerity is not in itself the essence of Brahmachari life. Brahmachari means, our Brahmachari life is Brahmacharya in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the essence. Being a Brahmachari isn't. So, developing strictness, so strict that we're harsh, that is not wanted. Bhakti means to be soft-hearted. So devotees may be very strict in observing the regulated principles, but at the same time remember that all the rules and regulations are meant to serve the principle of remembering Krishna. One other point, which I also mentioned in my book on Brahmacharya, this is the last one, so you can start to pass up your questions if there are any. The last point I'm going to make here in my presentation, that if you're feeling it's tough, you're having a hard time, you'd like to be a Brahmachari, but you're feeling it's tough, you're feeling the urges of the senses are getting a bit much, you can always take a break, not in Maya, but in India, where still, despite India's gross surrender to materialistic life, still somehow or other the atmosphere is more conducive for brahmacharis. And I'm not talking about just going to the holy dhams and wandering around and becoming kind of semi-spiritual tourist and going on one parikrama and another parikrama and taking a photo here and drinking a lassi there. But to spend a few months doing service, preaching, book distribution, it's a good spiritual boost, which has, in my experience, has helped many devotees. You may, maybe even for longer term, one devotee, he was the center he was, or the country and he was serving in was going through a disaster, and with his authorities it was ascertained that, alright, let him go to India ad infinitum. So he went for some time, and then the situation in that country settled down somewhat where there wasn't any book distribution. So I sent him back to start the book distribution party. So he did that for some years, and then again he's feeling that, doing well in book distribution, but feeling that it'll be difficult. He wants to remain a brahmachari, it will be difficult for me to do so. So again he went back to India. For a shorter term or a longer term, Srila Prabhupada wanted devotees to come to India to experience the spiritual culture, or whatever, again, whatever remnants are there. It's certainly noticeable, the difference between India and the West, even though India is such a mess spiritually, Hinduism, but still the culture is very favorable. So if you do decide to get married, that should be done in a mature way, in consultation with one's spiritual authorities, and not rushed into and just get married to the nearest consenting female that you happen to run into. Should be done in a mature way, but I also recommend that before you get married. Well, first of all, I recommend don't get married, but if you are going to get married, then spend a little time in India. It'll be good spiritual experience for you, which will help you also in your grihastha life and in your brahmacharya life if you don't get married. So that's the end of my formal presentation, and if there are any questions, please pass them up to me now, or if any comments from Janananda Maharaj, Prahladānanda Maharaj. Oh, another thing, I had something else written down, and then I decided not to say it. I say about maintain health, but of course Prahladānanda Maharaj already gave a whole presentation on that. But just one point, I'm not sure if you made that. A simple diet was the norm that Srila Prabhupada introduced with the feast on Sunday. Here's an amusing anecdote. I asked the temple president in Berry Place Temple, which was famous in the days when we had great feasts. Even then it was famous for great feasts. So after every Sunday feast, you'd climb up the stairs with great difficulty. How many flights was it? 6 flights of stairs. And then the Brahmachari room, which was about quarter the size of this room, and then not as big as that. No. Well, less than a quarter. Yeah, actually, it was about an eighth the size of this room. And we had anything from when all the devotees were out on book distribution, anything from 15 to 50 or 60 brahmacharis living there. Of course, they also slept in the shower room and on the stairs. where the stair went round the corner, it was a little bigger, so a short brahmachari could squeeze up there. And
sleep in the shower.
In the shower, yeah.
The shower was actually part of the brahmachari room.
Yeah. And that was Patit Udaran spot under the heater, the cloth heater, right? So anyway, you'd struggle up the stairs and try and find a spot among these various groaning bodies. It's like overindulged to diversity. So then once I asked our town president, a wonderful town president who was brahmachari at the time, Vichitravir was town president at the time, I asked him that seeing as we all totally overindulge and we can't control our senses and we get completely in Maya at the Sunday feast, why did Srila Prabhupada allow it? And he came right back and said that because if he didn't, we'd all bloop. And there's more stories to be told in that regard. The devotees who bloop and keep on coming back, and for the halava. Oh. Well, that's another story. There's somebody wonderful. I guess I'll take questions. There's lots of wonderful prasadam stories. So what was I going to say about that? I can't remember. Anyway, I got off track. Oh yeah, I was going to say simple diet. It's actually, yeah, simple diet. It's very important for brahmacharya life. It's too small. You took that serious about not wasting anything. You got a whole notebook there and you tore off a tiny little piece of that. How important is it that the brahmacharis have unity in daily activities, e.g., honoring prasadam together, having what together?
Recreation.
Recreation. What kind of recreation? E.g., sports. I'm not a great fan of sports, don't you know? That's another thing. I'm not in favor of sports. Some exercise, but sports, it's just too. Most sports are actually not very good exercise anyway. They just like, for instance, table tennis. You exercise certain parts of the body more than others. It's not. Almost any sport, it doesn't give you an all-round workout. Swimming, yeah, it's said to give you an all-round workout. I guess I'm not a very good swimmer. It seems for me that the arms and legs get exercised more. Distributing books together in the same area. Distributing books together is very important. It's really better not to go alone. And even devotees, they go together in a Sankirtan party, but it's good to see each other throughout the day, even if you're going door to door. It's important. Yeah, all these things, doing things together. It's a Sankirtan movement. It's a good point. Thank you very much.
Kirtan together.
Doing things together. Kirtan together.
Exercise.
Showering together. It means you don't all have your individual bathroom, and that's very important, especially for Scandinavia, where the kami culture is one of everyone does everything alone, right? They're the most miserable, impersonal suicide. Miserable, I'm saying, in the sense here of actually being unhappy. They're the most unhappy, impersonal, suicide people on earth. Because they do everything. They all have their own comfort zone. They don't interact with others. If there is interaction, there will be some friction also. But that friction is better than the superficial smiling at each other relationship. Again, so yeah, it's a very good point. Thank you very much. One's own program. To some extent, one may have, apart from the regular sadhana program, one may like to daily recite certain prayers, like that. But the basic program we do together. Good point, thank you. I'll keep it that. Maybe I'll put that in my revised edition of the Brahmacari book. Could you give me some advice as a Sankirtan group leader, how to rectify others, some general advice? Yeah, it's quite a topic, isn't it? It's not easy. I gathered a lot of material on this subject, on criticism, rectification, offences, fault finding, and I intend to put it all in my upcoming book, if it ever is another book on the end of Vaishnava culture, etiquette and behavior. It certainly is we could say it's an art on how to rectify others. I'm probably not very good at it actually, because by nature, some people by nature are very good at dealing with others, and some are not. And I'm not saying this out of false or real humility, but I'm probably more of the second category that I just mentioned. I'm not that naturally good at dealing with people. Empathy, That's mentioned in Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna. Atmopam yena sarvatra samam pashati yojuna sukham va yadi va dukam sayogi paramamataha. Lord Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that the best yogi is one who, to use the modern, well, it's not a modern term, but it's popular in the modern age, it's empathy with others. That considering that I suffer, I feel happiness and distress, so others do also. So trying to understand others' situation and how, and on that basis trying to relate to them and correct them. Of course, as I was mentioning also, Krishna didn't do this with Arjuna. He just told him, you're a damn fool. So, and you're not an Arya Jushtam. This is what you're saying is not fitting of you. So we have to, actually we should be able to say just by quoting Shastra. We shouldn't have to get into a whole psychological dealing with people, how to deal with people. It should be enough just to say that Prabhupada said this, Shastra says this, and please take note of it and behave accordingly. It should be enough. But practically speaking it isn't, and that's where all the Janananda Maharaj has a hand up, and he's actually much better at this than me. Although I must say that it can be very difficult. I remember in Malaysia now, so many devotees were, this is years ago, 20 years ago more. So many devotees were just totally unreasonable, giving you a very hard time just for pointing, for nothing actually. I don't know why they didn't do it to me, because I was much.
You that.
Oh, that's right. I was moved on, more likely. I was moved on. Prabhupada Swami kept on moving me around his zone. Yeah.
I was just thinking about it, said that Arjuna, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Krishna said you were down for number one, Arjuna had already kind of surrendered.
Arjuna had surrendered to Krishna, yes, and then Krishna told him you're down for number one. There was,
he had surrendered. It's a bit of that question mark there. If a person accepts you as an authority. If a person accepts you as an authority, yeah. If they don't accept you, then you've got to deal with it a little differently. If people don't accept you as an authority, you have to deal with them differently. Of course, the devotee here is asking as a Sankirtan group leader, so we also need to. The principle of following authority is something that Srila Prabhupada stressed very much, and at the present time in ISKCON that's been undermined a lot, and I would say so, it's largely due to the same reason that traditional respect for authority within secular society or Kami society, respect for authority, which was previously part of life. If we go back in history, everyone respected the king and then the priest, and nowadays the idea is to respect no one. And the historical development of this breakdown of respect has been misuse of authority, or people in positions of authority who are not competent for that position, who may not have been badly motivated. In many cases they were badly motivated, but they discharged their authority in such a way as to make the people their wards very uncomfortable. So I would say that's to a large extent the situation in ISKCON also. There's been a lot of misuse of authority, and either deliberately or due to people, square pegs being put in round holes, and the respect for authority is very much undermined, and of course from the wider culture no one respects anyone. So when people come to Krishna consciousness, it may be difficult for people to accept authority. Of course Srila Prabhupada said that we shouldn't accept people unless they're prepared to, they're welcome to come as friends, but then if they want to accept initiation, if they want to join this society as a full-time member, they should be prepared to follow the discipline. So one thing might be that we're careful who we bring in. On the other hand, if people are willing to come in, they're so few, we may be willing to take difficult cases also. But at the same time,
yeah, it does require some expertise, which is often, unfortunately, acquired by experience, and in the meantime, while we're gaining experience in how to deal with people, we're not dealing with them in the best of ways, and people are getting, in proverbial ISKCON language, burned out. So, yeah, this is quite I think maybe you could speak with, if you've done other Maharajas more time, you can maybe give more insights on that in a very Krishna conscious way. Again, I'm not the best person, I'm not the best role model in this regard. My style is more like, just do it, that's it. What's the problem? Which is also one way of doing it, actually. And it often works, and it often just like cuts through the maya by which people don't want to do what they should be doing. So it is one approach also. Srila Prabhupada, as the expert Acharya, dealt with different. He was an expert judge of time, place, and recipient, which is one of the qualities of Krishna. So he dealt with people in different ways. Again, going back to the old days in England, one way in which this is solved was that every couple of weeks or so, when all the traveling Sankirtan parties came back, there'd be a Sankirtan meeting which was basically reshuffling all the groups every time, because devotees, they couldn't live with each other. In that little Sankirtan van, there was like a lot of energy, and devotees were, I can't stay with him, so they get shuffled around, and then they get put back into the same person after some time. Although, actually, I was in some steady groups, despite being me. I was with Kalipani, who's even more fanatical than me. So we got on well together. And Madhav, he was a complete saint who tolerated both of us. So we stayed together for quite some time. Anyway, that was a wordy way of getting around the, I don't know exactly what you should do. Ask someone else. Ask Vijay. Patience, empathy. How should we think of and view senior devotees, gurus, swamis who propagate new age ideas, past life hypnosis, etc.? Respect them, and don't get too much involved in all that. There's certain people who I would advise respect them from a distance. I mean, if you don't want to get involved in all kinds of new agey things, then keep your distance. That's all. Just offer respect and don't get involved. Choose your seminars carefully. Choose your summer camps carefully. How should we think of Matajis as gurus and live in opulence, living in big houses? I'm not sure whether you're talking about Matajis living in opulence or gurus living.
The second question about Matajis GBC.
Matajis as GBC. Well, Srila Prabhupada never made any Matajis as GBCs, and you can understand what my view on that is from that. Personally, I feel that even though many women are competent in managing and this and that, I personally feel it's much more important at this stage in our Krishna conscious movement that they show the traditional role of being mothers and grandmothers and wives. There's no hope of Varnashram being established unless we start to do it. And as we find from Arjuna's plea to Krishna before he surrendered to Krishna, if the women are not in their proper position of being protected, then there'll be disaster in society. So briefly, I'm not very much in favor of women taking up positions of leadership. I don't see that Srila Prabhupada as a principle did so. He didn't make women temple presidents or gurus, and he emphasized their role as their social role as mothers and wives. Gurus living in opulence, or what's that?
I could answer the first question.
You've seen anybody's guru Swami? Well, living in opulence is not necessarily a bad thing for a preacher. Bhaktivedanta Thakur, before he accepted sannyas, was living pretty much the same way as Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj did, in extremely renounced life. After he took sannyas, he started living in big buildings with ornate furniture and wearing opulent clothing. That was a symptom of his sannyas, for the sake of preaching. So if someone's fully absorbed in preaching, they can use any amount of opulence for reaching out to a certain class of person. Personally, I'm not much inclined to that, but I don't decry others who may do so if they are actually using it for preaching and not using it just to live comfortably. So, it's not a question. H. Bhakti Charu Swami is right. All 6 sannyasis for lunch at one devotee. Yeah, I know. Thank you. Nowadays, women live in the ashrams. It was reasonable when Prabhupada was established, but not now. Well, the same principle applies. Prabhupada took up the revolutionary step of having women living in ashrams because they wanted to be Krishna conscious, but there was traditionally women stayed at home, and they could in India they could practice Krishna consciousness at home. Maybe, depended on their family members. It might be difficult for them to do so also, as it was for the gopis. But Prabhupada gave that facility. Is it necessary now? Well, with the advent of congregational preaching, it might be said not to be. There are more and more centers in which there are only brahmacharis, and I feel there's a case for that. Maybe in different countries there could be centers where there's brahmacharini ashram, and maybe other centers where there are small preaching centers where there are only brahmacharis. So if women want to join, they could join the brahmacharini ashram, because it certainly is more favorable if there's just a few brahmacharis, and if one young girl wants to join, not so young wants to join, obviously it's going to be better if they have, for them, if they join in a situation where there are more, there's already a set up brahmachari ashram. Brahmacharis can't look after brahmacharinis, and they're not meant to do that anyway. So yeah, there is a case for all male centers also, and there is a case for centers with women also. Yes, Janana Maharaj.
David Maharaj has adopted that principle in his ashrams, at least in New Zealand.
Of having women in charge?
No.
Sorry.
Well, yes and no. They have a brahmachari ashram, only brahmachari.
Yeah.
Because they preach in the city. Our temple is not in the city. It's only farms outside the city. They have their brahmachari ashram in the city, and they have a brahmacharini ashram in the city. 2 separate places. They have their own program.
Oh, they have separate brahmacharya ashram.
Yeah.
Run by women. Yeah.
It's been working pretty well so far.
It's been working well, yeah. Okay, that's an interesting observation.
Time will tell.
Time will tell, yeah. They should get married eventually.
Quite a few of them are.
Yeah.
But once they change up like that,
yeah. The thing is that in India, in the traditional Varna ashram society, women were trained in culture, and that they could, by going to the temples, they could learn about Krishna culture. And apparently it was there in Vaishnava families. They just imbibed it with their rites. It was just being Krishna conscious there was not anything separate from them. It wasn't something else that they adopted. It was there. Whereas in modern life, if one wants to be Krishna conscious, it requires a lot of training. If you come from the West, especially. So. There was a brahmacharini or whatever ashram set up by Yamuna after Guru Das took sannyas, but Prabhupada he warned again. He said, keep it nothing. Don't make it very opulent. Don't try and do anything very big or just keep it small. It was like a bhajan ashram for widows. Prabhupada seemed to have that idea. There are letters to Yamuna and Dinatarini, who the two, and he said you should be under the guidance of the GBC like this. Anyway, many of these questions, they could be discussed in great length, and we don't really have much time for that. There is little respect for senior devotees. They can't exercise the function of a guru. Complex problem, what to do? Yeah, well, it's something that has to be looked into. Someone who is actually a guru, they don't have to be appointed a guru. There's no real appointing a guru. That there may be formal acceptance, but we see certain devotees who they're not appointed as a guru, but people look up to them as guru anyway. They're naturally, by their qualities, devotees look up to them. Just like Chabuvanant Prabhu. So many devotees accepted him as their spiritual guide, and they keep his picture on their altar. He never accepted the role of sannyas or guru, but people respected him as a guru by his qualities. So I sometimes feel a little nervous when people say, well, people don't respect me enough. They should respect me as a guru. I've heard quite a few people say this. I'm senior. Why don't they respect me as a guru? Well, if one is senior and is actually acting in a way that attracts respect, then people will do. But if one is simply demanding respect, I don't know exactly who this is or what. I'm not saying that whoever wrote this is in that kind of syndrome, but I have seen that some devotees, they say, oh, why, there are all these disciples, they're respecting the guru, why don't they all come and respect me in the same way? But, well, you could take the responsibility and generally if a devotee puts them, especially a senior devotee, puts themselves out to try to help others and interact with them and makes himself their servant, then others will respect him. But if you simply say, I'm senior, I should be respected, then likely people will respect you formally, but not from the heart. Respect can't be legislated, only in a formal way. Little bit.
3 or 4 minutes, Maharaj. Another 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, well, I think I'm out of questions. No? What is it that preaching in Russia is so successful? Well, they have their problems there too. Srila Prabhupada himself predicted that these people will be first-class theists. Actual preaching is successful, whether many people come or many people don't come. If those who are preaching are doing so according to Guru, Sadhu and Shastra and are fully dedicated to the mission of the Lord, that is the success, whether people come or not. It is said love and penance can please the Lord together. Which penance is it? Together? What's the quote? Which penance more than the standard program could you advise for Brahmacharya? Whatever you're getting is okay. We don't have to dream up anything else. Don't think that if you're getting the regular program of temple activity or chanting around, Mangalarti, book distribution, Harinam, that's it. You don't have to think of anything. We're always thinking, what else can we do? Something new. Can you tell us the secret, or what's the formula, or it's all there. We just have to do it. We're always thinking, is there something special, some special thing by which I can get instant praying? Everything's there. Have faith in what we've been given. The idea of Zonal Acharya was perhaps misused in the past, but wouldn't it be better if the sannyasis would stay in one place and preach in that area, not to travel abroad, and so be more accessible to the congregation? The large amount of money is squandered on expensive flight tickets without significant preaching impact. Well, whether or not there is significant preaching impact, something that's been stated that there is not significant preaching impact. That is a subjective statement which I don't necessarily agree with. It said that money is squandered on expensive flight tickets. Well, Srila Prabhupada himself set the example of traveling around the world. It costs a lot of money for Srila Prabhupada to travel around the world, but he kept the whole movement going, and by doing so, he said that sannyasi should see that the wheel keeps on moving. In other words, that the movement is going on. So yeah, there is a case for sannyasis staying in one place and developing one area. There is also a case for them to travel, which is the traditional life of sannyasis, maybe not so widely. There was a case of one sannyasi, Panchadravida Swami, who wrote to Prabhupada and complained that I can never get a visa to stay in any country more than 2 weeks. Prabhupada said, that's good, then you can share your mercy more widely. So Prabhupada liked that. So Prabhupada also said there's no use of travel. I can't remember the exact quote, but in traveling there should be some significant service done. So simply traveling is meaningless. But I see that most of the sannyasis in our movement are working very hard. They're very dedicated, and they're not traveling around. Just like they go to so many cities, they don't go sightseeing like tourists in either. They're fully engaged in Krishna's service. They travel to meet the devotees and give inspiration. So I don't see that that's money squandered. It's a necessary thing. We need more sannyasis. Maybe there could be in smaller areas also. Some sannyasis, Shivaram Swami mostly stays in Hungary. But it doesn't have to be that everyone's like that. Alright, so we just still? Is there more?
We're going to move on now.
Okay, alright, we'll finish then. Alright, we'll finish. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. All you wonderful, great souls, thank you for your association, and hope to see you all again. Thank you to Janananda Maharaj and Prahladananda Maharaj and the devotees here for organizing that, and that will come up at 3:30. We're having a...
You'll be here with us?
I hope to be here. I might be with my physical father. He said he might come over this afternoon.